Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Up Front podcast. This is your host, Ryan Coyle, here on Pick Swap Media. But before we get into today's episode, let me remind you of our sponsor, the sportsdisplays.com. The Sports Displays are the creators of their unique product, the Jersey Mount, which can be installed to any surface and is significantly cheaper than the hundreds of dollars it usually costs for this type of quality display. So make sure to check out the link in our description and make sure to use our promo code PICKSWAP at checkout for 10% off and free shipping on that product. So help them out, help us out, and let's continue to grow the channel here at Pick Swap Media. Today's episode, we'll be getting into my NFL divisional previews. Been doing these the past 2 years. I've had some pretty good success, so looking to continue that over into year 3 here. Today, we're going to be starting off with the NFC East, sometimes known as the NFC Least, but I think this division has 2 potential playoff teams this year. And if all things shake out, maybe a third potentially, but that's more of a dark horse. Last year, my predictions were I had the Eagles in first place going 9-8 and getting winning the division. They wound up going 9-8. They finished in second place in the division, got a wild card spot. So a pretty good prediction there, with a lot of people thinking the Eagles were going to be one of the worst teams in the league last season. I predicted the Cowboys to go 8-9. They wound up going 12-5, finished in first place. They lost in the wild card round, though, just like Philadelphia did. Third team, I had the football team, which they were known as last year, going 7-10 and finishing in third. They did do just that, 7-10 finish, third place in the NFC East. And my fourth place team, I had the Giants going 7-10. They finished 4-13. So pretty good predictions there, I think you could say, from last year. And we'll carry it in to this year, hopefully looking to, emulate that same success going forward. So without further ado, we'll get into my 2022 NFC East predictions. Going to be running through each division in the NFL, all 8, and then we'll be doing one final episode the week that the regular season is about to kick off, breaking down my playoff bracket and who I think is going to be this year's Super Bowl champion. So without further ado, the first place team in the Philadelphia will be the Philadelphia Eagles and winning the NFC East this year. I predicted it last year. It didn't happen. They had a good season, like I was talking about earlier, made the wild card. But this year, I think they take that leap and they win the division. This is a division that has had no repeat winner since 2003, I believe the year is, when it was 2003, 2004, when it was Philadelphia. So last year, you look at Dallas, they won the division. It's going to be hard to repeat again. History's telling us. So I have the Eagles going 11-6, 4-2 in the division, and getting the 4 seed. When you look at this team on the offensive side of the ball, Jalen Hurts, it really all comes down to him, I think. He has more pressure on him, I think, than any other player in the entire NFC in his eyes. You could look at Aaron Rodgers maybe with all his individual success over the past few years and falling short in the playoffs, say he has a lot of pressure on him. You go over to the AFC, you look at like a guy like Tua, kind of make or break year for him as the quarterback of the Dolphins. I think Jalen Hurts has one of the more talented teams, especially on the offensive line and his skill players around him this year out of any player in the NFL. And it's really kind of all up to him how far this Eagles team goes. He can set himself up as the future of the Eagles franchise and be the franchise quarterback going forward and get himself a really big contract this offseason, or play himself potentially off the roster. I think that if the Eagles don't have like any playoff success, or unless he has a really good year and gets hurt down the stretch or something, a la Carson Wentz back in 2017, that the Eagles are going to look to use that draft capital, those 2 first-round picks, and their future draft assets to potentially go up and get one of these high-level quarterbacks this year. So really a make-or-break year for him. Everything this offseason around Philadelphia has revolved around what if in terms of Jalen Hurts. So he has an elite offensive line in front of him. One thing that does worry me a little bit, Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, they're in their 30s. We'll see if their elite all-pro level play slows down. Jason Kelce already had this elbow surgery. It sounds like he should be ready for week 1, but that was before the season even started, so you don't like to see that. And Lane Johnson, last year was able to stay healthy, but outside of that, he's been pretty banged up the past few years. Jordan Mailata emerging as one of the better young left tackles in the league. Landon Dickerson and Isaac Seumalo holding it down at guard. So this is a really good offensive line when they're healthy. I just want to see if they're able to all hold up for 17 games this year. Really nice set of skilled players. You look at the perimeter. This is definitely the best perimeter the Eagles have had since like Chip Kelly first got here in 2013, with going out and getting A.J. Brown. You got Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, I think, is ready to take off at tight end. Got a really nice running back by committee set up with Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, and Boston Scott, guys who can do a little bit of everything for you. And I think they just need one of Jalen Reagor or Quez Watkins, potentially even like a Zach Pascal, to step up and emerge as a wide receiver 3. If this team wants to go out and throw the ball around the yard a little bit more, they need someone to really step up into that role. I think they're hoping it's Reagor just because of that first-round pedigree that he has. But I think this is Quez Watkins' spot to lose. He's really impressed me in some moments in the NFL, and he has some of the top level speed. So you're able to get a field stretcher like him out there. This could be a very dangerous offense, but it all comes down to Jalen Hurts at the end of the day, as we know. Look at the defensive side of the ball. Really went out this offseason and improved this unit, put a lot of their money and draft capital towards fixing this side of the ball. Added Hassan Reddick to a 3-year deal. You got Jordan Davis on the defensive line as well now. Brandon Graham is back healthy. He's 34, I believe, though, so it'll be interesting to see how he rebounds from this Achilles injury. All reports from Eagles training camp have been he doesn't look like any slower or any worse, so hopefully he's still able to have that rock-solid year, go out, get you 6-7 sacks, be a really good defensive lineman. Derek Barnett comes back when he's healthy and when his head's on right, he's not committing stupid penalties. He can be a productive pass rusher, just another guy to throw in the rotation. Josh Sweat keeps getting better. Javon Hargrave had a really nice year last year. Fletcher Cox back again. Not the player that he once was, but still a really solid force in the middle. Milton Williams emerging as another young defensive tackle. Very deep group, which should help them. This is, I think, their deepest group since they won the Super Bowl or that 2018 season as well. You go out, you bring in Kaiser White at linebacker, a guy who has had 100-plus tackles with the Chargers before, drafting Nakobe Dean for your linebackers to go with Davion Taylor and TJ Edwards, who's apparently had a really nice camp. And then you look on the back end of the defense in the secondary. You pick up James Bradbury and Jaquiski Tart. They go with a really nice cornerback duo already of Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox. Tart, more of like a safety, but he can kind of play all over the back end of that defense. Anthony Harris is a pretty solid safety. Nothing really to rave about, but I think in the league these days, safety is more so as long as you're not getting hurt by them, like as long as you don't really notice their presence on the field, they're doing their job, unless you're one of those like top-level guys like a Minkah Fitzpatrick or a Derwin James. I think that the Eagles really wanted to invest in corner and make sure they're good there and just have like 2 solid safeties on the back end. Marcus Epps apparently has had a really nice camp. We'll see if he can translate that into success on the field in the regular season. But I'm really excited about the potential of this group for Philadelphia on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that they could be a top 10 unit, potentially top 5 if the pass rush improves from last year. Their coach, Nick Sirianni, his second year with Philadelphia, gave up play calling duties last year. That kind of went under the radar, I think, last season because he didn't announce it. So he seems to be a really good motivator, really able to connect with the guys. I'm still a little bit not out on him, I guess you could say, but a little bit hesitant to really believe in him long-term as an NFL head coach. I want to see how they do this year in year 2. I think year 2 will tell us a lot more about him and his system, see if he's able to really develop some of these younger players more and see what he can get out of Jalen Hurts. Breakout player, tight end Dallas Goedert. I think he's ready to take off, cement himself as like a top 5 or 6 tight end in the league this year. He got paid his big money, either this offseason or last offseason, but Zach Ertz out now. It's Dallas Goedert's job. He has gotten banged up over the years and missed some games. So if he's able to stay healthy, though, and he can really impact the game as a blocker, that's really, I think, an underrated part of his game. And he's also a very dynamic receiver as well. I think he's going to have a really big year. Him and Jalen Hurts have had a really good relationship this offseason, so it looks like he's in line for a big role, and he's my breakout player for Philadelphia. And then 2 games to watch for Philadelphia this year, a non-divisional game. I got week 2 versus the Vikings, the Monday Night Football game, home opener. I think that's a big game. 2 teams that are most likely going to be vying for playoff spots, whether it's division title or a wild card spot. This game we could look at down the line and say, wow, if Philadelphia won that game or if Minnesota won that game, they would be in the playoffs. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And then week 16 at Dallas on Christmas Eve, I think that could probably – has a good chance to be the game that really decides the NFC East winner this year. So that's my breakdown for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. I got them going 11-6, 4-2 in the division, and earning the 4 seed in the NFC. Number 2 team in the division, the Dallas Cowboys. I have them at 9-8, 3-3 in the division, getting the 7 seed. On the offensive side of the ball, I think this group took a step back from their production the last few seasons. when Dak has been healthy, they've been a very dangerous group, and they're still going to be dangerous. But this team lost some pieces this offseason, so I'm interested to see if Dak can elevate maybe some lesser guys around him. I think he's a top 12 quarterback in the NFL, but this is the first year where we won't see him without a ton of weapons at wide receiver. I think CeeDee Lamb's a stud. He's going to really cement himself as a top 10, maybe even a top 5 guy by the end of this year. But then you throw in guys after that. It's kind of an unknown at the receiver right now with Michael Gallup coming back from that ACL injury. It sounds like he won't be ready for the first few weeks of the season. So then you need other guys to step up. And then you also traded Amari Cooper and you lost Cedric Wilson, who was a guy who always seemed to produce when other guys were out of the lineup. So some question marks there at the receiver spot. Zeke is back again. Really solid running back still. I don't think he's the elite guy that he was earlier in his career, but I think we could see a lot of Tony Pollard this year, especially in the receiving game. Like I said, with the lack of weapons at receiver right now, we could see a guy like Pollard step up in that regard. But they form a really nice tandem at running back. They do have an aging offensive line, though, not the same group that they used to. Tyron Smith constantly hurt. He'll probably play 12 games, I'd say, at most. He seems always to be missing games, whether it's like a back or a knee injury. They lost Lyle Collins to the Bengals. Zach Martin, though, still an elite guard. This is still a solid group, but they're definitely aging and not the elite bunch that they used to be. And Dalton Schultz has emerged as a very good tight end and having a really good relationship with Dak. So I like the Cowboys to go 9-8, mainly thanks to their offense. We'll go to the defense now, though, which is kind of worrisome for me if you're a Cowboys fan. Another unit that I think got worse this offseason. They lost Randy Gregory, who, after having a lot of off-the-field issues his first few years of his career, came out and emerged himself as a pretty solid NFL pass rusher. They also missed out on signing Von Miller, who was rumored to potentially be interested in the Cowboys, a guy from Texas. And then DeMarcus Lawrence hasn't really been healthy the past few years, and I think that's really impacted his production since he got that big payday a few years ago. But that can all kind of be thrown aside when you have a stud and a guy who's already a top 10 defensive player in the league and could potentially be in the conversation as the best pass rusher in the NFL by season's end with Michael Parsons. He's a game wrecker. He's just a freak in nature, and he can do a lot of different things, whether it's drop back in coverage and play running backs and tight ends or just get after the quarterback. He's a really unique player, and he's one of the better defensive players in the league already who could flip the game upside down just by himself. So I like the depth across this defensive line, but there's no real elite player on that line. I think Lawrence isn't an elite guy. He's a high level player, a potential like Pro Bowler, but he's not like an all pro type guy that I think teams are really forcing double teams to, making sure other guys are going over, chipping them, stuff like that. So I think a lot more attention is going to be turned to Micah Parsons' plate this offseason thanks to the departure of Randy Gregory. They do have, like I said, though, some nice depth across the defensive line. I think they have some solid pass rushers with like Dante Fowler Jr. They got some nice guys on the interior as well. Diggs is really a hit or miss player. He could win you a game or he could lose you a game in the blink of an eye. So I'm still a bit hesitant to like really have an opinion on stuff or Trayvon Diggs. I want to see if he's able to replicate that production last year. It's going to be really hard getting all those interceptions and pick sixes. So and I think Anthony Brown at the other corner is awful. I don't know how he still has a job. We'll see Kelvin Joseph as well if he can take a leap in his second year in the league. The secondary, though, is a major question mark for this Dallas Cowboys team. Van Der Esch is a stable linebacker when he's healthy, but he misses a lot of games as well. So I think you really better hope Diggs is able to replicate that production from last year and convert defense into offensive points. And then hope Lawrence returns to health and his previous form and Parsons stays at the level he's at, or he even elevates more and takes another leap. So the defense is worrisome for me. There's a lot of questions across that group. I think this is a team that has the potential to be playing in some shootouts this year. Coach Mike McCarthy, not a big fan of his since he got to Dallas. I think he's underachieved. 12-5 last year, home playoff game lost. We all know the end of the game situation with Dak. That was a big topic of discussion, I think, after that game and throughout the offseason. Make or break year for him. If he doesn't at least win a playoff game, potentially even like be a division winner, I think we could see him on his way out. And as we all know, Sean Payton potentially on his way in. My breakout player, as I talked about earlier, I'm a little bit worried about the wide receiver group for Dallas this year, but they do have a rookie named Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama. He seems to be turning some heads at camp and able to step into that wide receiver 2 role from day one. So he's going to be playing a lot from day one in a, I think, pass-happy offense with Dak Prescott running the show, I think he could have a big first year and be a breakout player in the NFL. My games to watch for them. Week 10 at the Packers. I have both of these teams competing for a wild card spot and a division title, so that'll be a big game there just for the NFC standings, and two of the bigger brands in the NFL is a primetime 425 game on Fox. And then we got, just like the Eagles, Week 16 versus the Eagles, Christmas Eve. Like I said earlier, that could potentially be for a division crown down the line, so a lot of eyeballs will be on that game around the holiday season. All right, the third place team in the NFC East. We got the Washington Commanders going 6-11, 3-3 in the division. We turn their attention to the offense like we did first with the other two teams. And like most teams, you're going to hear throughout these divisional previews from me, you're only going to go as far as your quarterback takes you. And personally, I think the Carson Wentz slander going out and acquiring him this offseason, I think it can be a little bit too much at times. I think you could definitely do worse than him at this stage of his career, but you could also do better. I still would put him in that bottom half of the league at the quarterback position. And without like a perfect situation around him with a really high level offensive line and like elite skill players on the outside, I think he's going to fall short, and he could either resort to maybe being a backup quarterback after this year. I could even see him getting benched midway through the year and throwing Taylor Heineke just because of that success kind of he's had under Ron Rivera so far, and just showing the ability to win games in spite of or despite like his lack of like overall talent. I think he's just like a gamer and finds ways to go out and win football games. But I think we could see potentially, it is a bold prediction for me, but Carson Wentz, if he does not have success this year, or if he suffers another major injury, walking away from the game at an early age, just like Andrew Luck did. He's a guy who's really invested in other stuff off the field, as you should be, but he really likes to like hunt. He loves the outdoors. He's a big family guy. He loves to do like the community service and stuff like that, which all great things for him. But if he suffers like an injury or doesn't have much success this year, I could see him walking away from the game. He got paid his rookie contract. He got the big extension from Philadelphia as well. So he has enough money. That's one of my bold predictions. Watch out for a potential Carson Wentz retirement this offseason. I think that we definitely could see that happen if Washington doesn't have success this year. The Commanders, I'm not sure if I said that at the beginning of the show. I might have called them the football team. But I have major questions amongst this offensive line as well. Brandon Sheriff left. He was really a rock-solid player there since he got drafted out of Iowa about 5 years ago. I like the tackle duo with Charles Leno. He's a pretty solid veteran guy, and Sam Cosmi, an emerging player, I think, at that position. But the interior is poor. Like I said, Sheriff left. So this is a group that I'm worried about. I'm high on Antonio Gibson. I really like his dual threat ability as a receiver and a runner. I think McLaurin is a bit overrated, but we'll see him with probably the best quarterback of his young career with Carson Wentz. And then they also have Logan Thomas coming back. I want to see something more out of this Diami Brown, Curtis Samuel duo, though. One of those guys needs to step up and emerge as wide receiver 2 for that offense. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball for this team. One of the more talented groups in the league, especially across the offensive line where everyone's a first-round pick pretty much. Chase Young coming back from the ACL injury. It sounds like he won't be ready for the start of this season either. But they have great depth and some other potential star players on that group. You got on the interior, you got Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, 2 former Alabama guys, really productive so far in their career. And then Montez Sweat, I really like him as a pass rusher as well. So you get Chase Young back in that fold, hopefully healthy for Washington fans. That could be a dangerous group. They underperformed last year. They need to step it up this year and live up to that pedigree. They also need last year's first-round pick, Jamin Davis, to improve at linebacker. I like the cornerback duo of William Jackson and Kendall Fuller on the outside, though, and the safety tandem of Bobby McCain and Cameron Curl. That's a pretty solid group. They're not really going to lose you games, but I don't think they're really going to win you games either. And like I was talking about earlier, that's something I look for out of my safeties. But I think at the end of the day, the lack of offensive line play is going to be the demise for this team, and I think it's going to cause Carson Wentz to play a lot of superhero ball and turn it over like we saw a few years ago in Philadelphia. So I'm not high on Washington this year. If all strikes well, though, and Wentz, I don't think he'll ever return to 2017 form, but if he returns to that 2019 form that he did with Philadelphia, even last year, he was pretty solid, but he missed a lot of the easy plays, and I think still he's going to try and play a lot of hero ball, knowing that this could be like his make or break as a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think that's going to lead to some turnovers, potential injuries for him as well. If things break well, I could see the Commanders flirting with 8 or 9 wins, but I have them going 6-11 this year. Coach Ron Rivera, really like him as a coach, but they just fired their defensive line coach the other day. I don't know if that's kind of just an area of concern with how things are looking in Washington right now, but firing a coach a few weeks in training camp is definitely a question mark for me, especially with a group that talented. He might not be liking what he sees out of them. He's a coach who's had established success, a really good story, beating cancer and everything. I like him going forward as a coach, but he's another guy in a position where if things with Carson Wentz don't work out, it could look bad on him as well. And we might see if the Commanders bottom out with all that talent on the defensive end, and then some of these high-priced players on offense as well, we could see him on his way out. So a big year coming up for Ron Rivera too. My breakout player, Dyami Brown, wide receiver. He was a second or third round pick, I believe, last year, the 2021 draft out of North Carolina. Didn't play that much last year. I think I saw he played in 15 games, but only started 2. He didn't play that many snaps. Only had 12 catches for 165 yards in the air. But this is a guy with blazing speed, a really good deep threat. I think with Carson Wentz, who has a really strong arm and can get the ball down the field, I think we could see some success from him in that regard. But at the same time, Wentz does miss a lot of easy throws. So Dyami Brown might have to be adjusting a little bit more. But when we saw Wentz at the peak of his powers, he could throw a really nice deep ball. I remember a bunch to Nelson Aguilar that 2017 season. So I like Brown to have a breakout year and emerge as a really solid receiver in the NFL this season with Carson Wentz. Games to watch, Week 3 versus Philadelphia. That's Wentz's first game versus the Eagles. I think that's going to be a really cool and exciting game. See how both franchises react to that. And then I have Week 9 versus the Vikings. Kind of like I talked about with both the Eagles and the Cowboys. I have them competing for playoff spots. I think around Week 9, we'll kind of know if the Commanders are a team that does have a chance to compete for the division or the wild card based off of how they're doing that far in the year. And I also think Taylor Heineke could be starting by then if Carson Wentz either gets hurt or he's not playing well. Like I said, Rivera might feel like his job is in jeopardy and he might turn to a guy like Heineke to have some more success. So I think Week 9, that'll be a really good benchmark in the season for Washington. And then to finish up our last place team in the NFC East, we got in 4th the New York Giants at 5-12, going 2-4 in the division. Looking at the offense, there is some talent on this group and a lot of high-priced, like high draft pick type guys. I'm going to say it though, throughout many of these episodes, I'm worried about the quarterback position with this team. Daniel Jones, prove it year, just like Jalen Hurts, just like Carson Wentz as well. I think Dak Prescott's the only safe quarterback in this whole division right now. It's a make or break year for him. They didn't pick up his 5th-year rookie option, so he's either going to be an unrestricted free agent this offseason. He could get franchise tagged, or he could potentially sign back on a 1 or 2 year deal with New York if they like what they see out of him, but they don't want to commit long term. If he does go out there and ball out though and proves that he's a different quarterback and he's got this good chemistry working with a new head coach, Brian Daboll, he's most likely going to get paid or that franchise tag. So if not, if he has a bad year, he's probably going to resort to just being a long-term, lifelong back. So a make or break year for this guy's career. I think you could look at this season. Offensive line has been improving over the past few years. They have 2 top 10 picks at tackle now with Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal. I really like that duo, 2 SEC guys. I think that's going to be a really solid tackle duo. And you're going to need that dealing with the Philadelphia defensive line. Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, still a solid guy, even though I said he's not really an elite player anymore. And then that Washington group up front. So this is a division that has a lot of good pass rushers and really strong defensive linemen. I like that tackle duo. The interior is still a question mark, just like with Washington. Do we get a healthy Saquon Barkley? Is he able to stay on the field? Is this offensive line able to give him some more rushing lanes? That's something I want to watch. Saquon, really exciting, really fun player to watch, but hasn't been able to be that productive over the past few years just because of injuries and lack of offensive line play. So if we are able to get a healthy year out of him, I think the Giants could potentially flirt with 6 or 7 wins, but I think that's their ceiling for this year. Some nice weapons at receiver. Kenny Golladay got that big deal, but didn't pan out last year in New York. Sterling Shepard still around, solid player. Kadarius Toney, Darius Slayton, and then rookie Wan'Dale Robinson has been emerging as a nice player in camp. I think he's going to get a lot of touches in this Giants offense. Find ways to get him and Toney the ball, guys who are good with in terms of yak. So a lot of good pieces on this offense. High-priced talent, early draft investments on this unit. But can they put it all together? I don't think so with Daniel Jones running the show. Daboll really helped develop Josh Allen, though, into the star quarterback he is. So let's see if he can do it again with a guy who doesn't have that much like similar talent, I think you could say, but similar tools in terms of he's an athlete, he can run, he's got really good size. So we'll see if he can take what talent and tools he has and turn him into a competent NFL starting quarterback. The defense, I like some of their pieces across the defensive line, and I feel like they have a nice foundation there. Azeez Ojulari reportedly has emerged as a really nice pass rusher throughout training camp. He had a nice rookie year last year with 8 sacks. Kayvon Thibodeau, a top 10 pick. He was kind of viewed throughout most of the season as the number one guy. He slipped, so maybe the Giants are able to get lucky there with him. Leonard Williams, since going over to the Giants, has been a really nice player. Dexter Lawrence, a solid defensive tackle as well. So they don't have much talent and depth beyond those guys on the defensive line, but that's a nice foundation to work with and build with going forward with Joe Schoen at the GM and then Brian Daboll as the new head coach. Blake Martinez is a tackle machine at linebacker, but isn't that great in coverage, so that's an area of question for me, the whole linebacker spot for the New York Giants. Not much talent at the cornerback either. I think Adoree Jackson's overrated. A pretty solid player, but his name and just like his first-round former pedigree and his starting back in the day at USC, I think it kind of gets hyped up a little bit too much at this stage in his NFL career going into either year 4 or year 5, I believe. I like Xavier McKinney, the young safety from Alabama. I like him to emerge as a solid player going forward. But I think new defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, long-time defensive coordinator with the Ravens, is going to have to get creative with his rushers and his blitzes like he usually does to make up for the lack of talent on the second and third levels of this Giants defense. Head coach Brian Daboll, I'm a big fan of his. He was a guy that I wanted Philadelphia to get when they went out and eventually hired Nick Sirianni, but he seems to be a really creative offensive play caller, really know how to connect with the quarterback, as we saw with Josh Allen. I like him as the head coach of the Giants going forward. I just think he needs to get his guy in there, his quarterback. I've heard a lot about this year with being like the Daniel Jones preview year, kind of buys Daboll and Shane another year for I think their time in New York, because if it doesn't work out with him this offseason, Daniel Jones, they'll be able to go out and get their own quarterback most likely in the draft this year. It's supposed to be a star-studded group, so not much pressure on Daboll this year. I want to see what he can do with this team, though. And I think if things don't work out with Daniel Jones, they're able to get one of those top quarterbacks like Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud or Will Levis or Anthony Richardson or some of the guys names getting thrown around. He could have a very successful career in New York one day. My breakout player, touched on him a little bit earlier, Azeez Ojulari, 8 sacks in 2021, pass rusher out of Georgia a few years ago. He slid in the draft a bit because of knee concerns, but he proved to be pretty healthy last year throughout most of the season, and he showed that he can be a really productive pass rusher. So I like Ojulari going forward. I think him being a breakout player in 2021, being a double-digit sack type of guy, is a pretty smart and safe investment there. And then games to watch for the New York Giants. Got Week 3 versus Dallas on Monday Night Football. That's the first big game, big rivalry game in the division for the Daboll and Shane era. Monday Night Football with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman now. All eyes will be on that game. And then Week 11 versus the Lions, kind of like I had with Washington, and Week 9 versus the Vikings. I think that'll be a good benchmark game where, all right, we'll see kind of, is Daniel Jones the guy? Are the Giants having a good season? It'll be pretty easy to tell by then. And they're going to be competing with a Lions team who I think is going to be hovering around the same win total as them, kind of in that 5 to 7, maybe 8 at best win total area. I could see the Giants. So if Daniel Jones bottoms out, this team winning 3 or 4 games, because you're like I've said a few times, you're only going to be as good at the end of the day as the quarterback takes you. So to run through it again real quick, got the Philadelphia Eagles finishing in first place at 11-6, getting the 4 seed in the NFC. Dallas Cowboys 9-8, getting the 7 seed, that last wild card spot. Commanders 6-11, missing the playoffs, and the New York Giants 5-12, missing the playoffs. But that'll do it for the NFC East preview. Next episode will be NFC North, followed by the South and the West before we get over to the AFC. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Look forward to cranking out some more of this content going forward as we head into the NFL season. If you haven't already, please like our videos, subscribe, and make sure to stay tuned. Some exciting stuff coming up here with Beef Up Front and Pick Swap Media as we head into the football season. But thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will talk next time.